your commission later. So thank you all for having me. I guess I'm leading up to Tom Shields, one of my favorite Democrats. And congratulations to you all for a really, this is an excellent group, and I think that it is at it's at a key intersection, which is the personal stories and the people who can make LGBT folks not some mysterious or threatening other, but people who are like other people. And I think that breaking down those walls is really critical. So I'm just going to talk, Roland asked me to come and talk about some of the messaging and the politics around this. I just want to introduce myself a little bit and then get to those, and maybe that'll be a conversation and some contributions for you all as you go about this very hard work of being activists in a very tough terrain, as we all know. As Roland said, I'm an attorney. I have a small business in Arlington. I'm also a professor Virginia Tech up there at the satellite campus, and I've done a lot of work on politics and activism in Virginia for 15 years. The Democratic Party, a bunch of activists, election protection, voting reform, some social justice issues. This issue in particular affects me personally because a very close member of my family is in Richmond in a very long-term same-sex relationship. I have actually hung out at the volleyball court at Babes. Not many statewide candidates probably could say.
I knew why I wanted to be
and
I have too.
Yeah, and I watch with great enthusiasm and excitement the cultural changes that are ongoing in Richmond and the greater metro area. I think that it is fast becoming. Ray and I were talking about the changes, and it's been pretty astonishing. I was an official in the Warner administration. I was one of his two counselors in the gubernatorial administration, and I lived in Richmond then and was splitting my time with Charlottesville. And I remember when Broad Street was not exactly the diverse, exciting, world you see now when you go to First Fridays, which I just did last month. And it's extraordinary to me to watch the change. And when you guys talk about feeling comfortable here and embraced and welcomed, that I think is a very welcome change over the last 10 years. I don't think people would have said that, maybe in the 80s quite as much. So I think those are exciting changes that are afoot in Richmond. I have recently started a political action committee called the New Dominion Project PAC. The website is newdominionproject.com. And this is a combination of journalism and advocacy. But it's a political action committee. I have to say I am exploring running an office for Office of the Future. I'm thinking about it. This is a way to sort of figure out the issues and work with folks to try and develop the reasons for what we would want to do in office. And by my lights, one of the reasons I wanted to set up this project with the help of a lot of activists around Virginia, we have a steering committee with people from Bristol to Newport News to Alexandria and Richmond, was I think that Democrats need to do a far better job of being seen as optimistic, not just being seen, of being optimistic, being reform-minded, being a party of the future, being a party of solutions, and above all that, showing that our ideas are about people and not just about a bunch of abstract white papers and talking points. And Republicans, if you watch them as they go about their, I'm sorry, this is very partisan, so I take that back. Far-right extremists sometimes do a very effective job of very soundly beating my party about the head and shoulders with one anecdote or one face or one story or one fact that very methodically blows apart hundreds of pages of very good policy. I'm trying to do it right now with Tim Kaine on this Jens Soring, this murderer who he sent back to Germany. They are trying to make the entire campaign 18 months in advance about one person and one story. They're good at this, okay? So I think that we actually have a very robust arsenal at our disposal, which is the stories and the people who are affected and helped by our policies, I think, are many more, because we are the party of the people, or whether it's party, we are the activists who are interested in people. So partly what we're doing with the New Dominion Project is telling the stories of activists, business leaders, reformers, and ideas who are taking Virginia ahead very actively. We just put up one this morning about a guy I met yesterday in Alexandria who turned a gutter business he started out of James Madison University, gutter and exterior improvement, into a solar business that is very successful, just created 22 jobs, and he just worked with the General Assembly to pass a fund to help homeowners install, to help finance their solar improvements, and it actually passed. Governor McDonnell signed this. Improvement in Richmond, you know, a business leader. I mean, a story that not that many people are going to hear, and he's a very charming, interesting guy, and now that's in the bloodstream of the activist, you know, to the extent that this sort of breaks through. So that's what I'm about, and the issues are personal for me, and I think that, just a final note, I mean, when I'm thinking about you really have to go back to your first principles about, especially in Virginia, because it is hostile territory, about what motivates all of us to get involved in this mad, crazy business of trying to change and improve Virginia when it seems so often it's one step forward and two steps back, right? And I think that for me, it is because I'm an optimist. And I do, no matter how much evidence there is to the contrary, I do generally believe that the best days are ahead. And when Barack Obama said the moral universe, the moral arc of the universe is long, but it bends toward justice, which comes from Scripture and it comes from Dr. King, I believe that. But it requires all of us to bend it. But I do think that if you look at the universe, things are getting better with regard to rights, equality, but it's not easy, and there's a lot of dips in the road. I'm an optimist. I think that Virginia, all of us as Virginians, we have a very extraordinary, unique past with a lot of, we are where massive resistance happened, but we are also the land of Thomas Jefferson and Oliver Hill. And we are a land of pretty extraordinary leaders. And I am not surprised at all when I look at a lot of the time when very hard progress happens on political issues that divide people, it happens here because we are so diverse and so divided that anybody who can crack the code of stringing one idea, a progressive idea, through the whole Commonwealth has an idea for the whole country. That's what a battleground state means, and that's why Mark Warner came out of Virginia. Chuck Robb, going way back to the 80s. Doug Wilder. I mean, these were real leaders who figured something out that worked for a very divided Commonwealth. So I think that to the extent that, following what Roland is saying, that we can all put our minds together what will work and communicate across Virginia, we are doing not just a service for ourselves, but and to our heritage, but for the country. All right, so on strategy and tactics on LGBT issues, I just got engaged, which unfortunately is something that isn't available to many, to many members of the community here. But my fiance is a graduate student in security studies, and I've done a lot of on the side. I've done a lot of consulting and advising on national security and foreign policy issues. That's a third thing I teach and have worked in. And there is, I was reflecting on how to talk about the difference. There's a very famous military strategist named Clausewitz who advised that the best way to design your battle plan was to administer crippling force to your enemy at their weakest point and to confront them directly and overwhelm them and crush them. That's the Clausewitz theory. Then there was, and this is what you get taught when you learn security studies, then the completely opposite theory was by Sun Tzu, who was another very famous military strategist. They teach this stuff at West Point, they teach this stuff in Afghanistan. Sun Tzu said, you are most likely to achieve your victory if you avoid kinetic conflict entirely. Kinetic is when you're seeing some kind of physical conflict. The ideal victory is not to engage at all, and to win without kinetic conflict and outsmart your enemy, and to change the battlefield. That obviously has been a fraught choice for activists on these issues. Do you conflict and overwhelm and try somehow to win, or do you somehow outsmart? Now, I am coming in my life to the conclusion that on these very hard cultural issues, that the second approach, not to disregard or dismiss the first, but the second approach can actually work a little bit better in places like, especially in places like Virginia. One example, the Small Business Insurance Parity Act, which passed in 2005, which was where Virginia finally decided to allow, we're Dillon's rule state. It's very hard to do anything without express grant from Richmond, from the sovereign in Richmond. This goes back to medieval times, but this is why you can't do creative local activism without permission from a very conservative capital. This happened because the business community stepped up and they said, we need to be able to extend same-sex benefits to our employees because we won't be able to compete, and we need to be able, and they just sort of delivered that message to very divided forces in Richmond, and it conveyed, because when the business community gets on your side on a fractious issue in Virginia, a very pro-business state, you can actually move the ball forward some. I take that story as instructive. When David Duke, this is a lesson from another state, when he was going to be the U.S. Senator from Louisiana. This is a former Ku Klux Klan Grand Wizard. This was several years ago. He lost because the business community turned against him and said, this is going to make our state an embarrassment and a laughingstock. It'll turn off tourism. Again, very Sun Tzu, right? I mean, a very different way of defeating these real bad policies. So some of the lessons that I'm watching as this is a this is extremely in flux, I think, LGBT. I mean, these numbers on approval of gay marriage are whipsawing. I'm just trying to check so I don't go over time. Are whipsawing all over the place. I think the culture is changing on this issue as we speak. In Virginia, I think we just went up to 47-43 on gay marriage, which was 2 weeks ago. Astonishing changes.